Okay, so we hear this all the time. You know, we have fly rods on the rack from $89 all the way to $1,000. And we hear it, is a high-end rod really worth it?
$99.
$199.
$250.
$299. Am I talking too loud?
Yeah. $350.
$429.
$475.
$675.
$849.
$1,000. Okay, so we hear this all the time. You know, we have fly rods on the rack from $89 all the way to $1,000. And we hear it, is a high-end rod really worth it? So what do you think, Lance?
Yeah, to me, a high-end rod is totally worth it. It's also not for everybody. A high-end rod doesn't fit in everyone's budget. A high-end rod probably dictates that you use it often. I think it's maybe unreasonable to spend $1,000 on a rod you're going to use twice per year. But for people that are out 2 or 3 times a week, $1,000 rod's not really that big a deal.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about it this way as well. I mean, the higher end rods, and we say $1,000, but we're really talking pretty much about anything from the $700 range on up. And you can even get way more than $1,000 on fly rods when you get into the custom world. But a lot of the things that you have to consider are, you know, number one, warranty. You know, how long is the company that you're going to buy that fly rod going to be around? That's one thing. Another thing is, and I was able to tour the Scott Fly Rod facility in Colorado, and you know, it kind of drove it home that the materials to build fly rods are readily available, not only here in the States, but all over the world. But how they're designed and how they're put together are radically different depending on the manufacturer.
So some of the things that we think separate the men from the boys, if you will, in fly rods are the rod itself, the blank, how fast the rod goes from flex to straight. We call that recovery speed. Recovery speed generates line speed. So you generate some speed with your hand or your arm, and the rod itself creates some speed. So lightweight rods and rods that have the materials, the resins and taper design to go from flex to straight really quickly are very accurate, provide more power and more line speed. So you have more control and you're a more efficient angler with a high-end rod. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is most rods nowadays are 4-piece. A while back, most rods were 2-piece. We still have a few anglers that hesitate. They haven't bought a rod maybe for 10 or 15 years and they want another 2-piece. They're not really available anymore. The reason for that is 4-piece rods, the ferrule systems that are in place now are so slim and don't affect the action much, so the highest end rods are all made basically in 4-piece options. Other things of note, high-end rods are oftentimes made these days for specific techniques. Again, going back 15, 20, 30 years, you had rods that were designed to just cover a base, a very broad base, let's say. Nowadays we have rods that still do that. We still have just a 9'5" weight, but we also have rods that are specific to Euro nymphing, specific to streamer fishing, specific to saltwater fishing, and all of those have different attributes, different actions, different amounts of lifting power. They're designed to cast different rigs, etc., etc. So depending on what your target is, you might select a different rod for each purpose, or you might be one that just needs one good fly rod for your trout fishing, and maybe a 9'4", or 5, or 6, depending on where you live and where you fish, might be the best rod for you.
You know, the other thing is a high-end rod's usually designed by somebody who really knows what they're doing as far as fly casting and actually fishing the rod. They're getting these rods, they're making sure that people cast them, they fish them, they can make tweaks on the fly, as opposed to maybe something overseas that just gets a blank for a mandrel and they just start rolling as many rods as they can. And they might sell those rods to a variety of different companies. Now, it's not saying that those rods aren't good. We're just saying that the high-end rods are the ones that technically, you know, are a superior rod for the technique-specific things like Lance was talking about. Like Scott has an 8'8" 4, an 8'8" 4 weight. Why? It's because maybe on that mandrel it casts better. Maybe that was a better rod for dry flies. Who knows? But it's a phenomenal rod to cast.
For clarity, we're not at all against low-end rods. We think that you know, the value-priced rods are important in the market. We think that they're great to get people into the sport. We also find that as people evolve within fly fishing, they tend to gravitate more towards high-end rods. That's because they're higher performing rods. That said, almost all of us start out with an inexpensive rod and then we grow from there. So the inexpensive rods, as Cheech mentioned, are oftentimes made, most of the times made in Korea or China, most commonly. They're actually quite good for the price, but they're made by somebody that's, you know, clicking a time clock. They are there just for a job, versus most of the high-end rods, truly high-end rods, are US made with a few exceptions. And those high-end rods are usually made by someone in a fly fishing factory that is passionate about fly fishing and passionate about fly rods.
The analogy I always like to use is when you're buying a drill. Like, I'm not a woodworker, so I just go and I buy something that maybe will last me a little while because I'm going to use it for a few projects here and there. But if I were a carpenter, I would go and buy the very best drill that's in my budget so that I knew that it was reliable and it would work for me every time. It's kind of like why Lance doesn't buy Fords. He just can't handle the Ford.
I can't handle having it in the shop all the time. I need something that's reliable.
So he buys a little foreign-made Toyota. No, but at the end of the day, is a high-end fly rod for you? The answer is maybe. If you're a really serious fly fisher, you're going to use it all the time, and you can really take advantage of what that rod's going to do for you on the stream, then yes. And also, if it's in your budget, then yes. If it's going to kill your budget and you're not going to be able to eat for a month, as long as you're cool with that, then it's probably okay for you. Like Lance, he doesn't ever eat. Me?
Right.
I eat.
I eat as much as he does. We just wear it differently.
Okay, another thing that we hear all the time is which rod is best? And guys will say, oh, Scott's the best, or no, Sage is the best, or Orvis is the best. Everybody has their opinions. Well, guess what? Typically when people say something is the best, it's because that's the one that they spent their money on. You know, that's the one that they have. The answer is every single rod company out there produces a good rod. If not, they wouldn't be in business. So we fish a wide variety of different rod brands, and sometimes we do find rods that we do prefer a little bit more than others, but the best is a relative term. So what's best for me definitely isn't going to be best for Lance, because we fish totally different. Right?
Well, maybe not totally, but a little bit. But you're exactly right. Rods are just opinions. You know, the best one is the best one for you based on your target species, based on your techniques, based on your casting preferences, and based on your investment range. Get the best one for your money and just enjoy it. So in a nutshell, get the best rod you can afford based on how often you'll use it, and the bottom line, go fish and have fun.